All right, so breaking news coming in just right now. U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has now said that the massive U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran, which Washington says killed the country's supreme leader, Khamenei, show that those who harm Americans must pay a price. In a post on X, Hegseth said, if you kill or threaten Americans anywhere in the world, as Iran has, then we will hunt you down and will kill you. He said that the Iranian regime had their chance, yet refused to make a deal. And now they are suffering what he calls the consequences. Now, this is the latest that we are getting. In his remarks from Secretary of War of the United States has said that Iran attack sends a message to the enemies. All right, to discuss more, we are now being joined live by West Asia expert Nader Hashemi. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. We know that these attacks have been happening for it's been more than 16 hours now. According to you, how long will these attacks go on, and what is the end goal for U.S. and Israel as of now?
Well, when Donald Trump made his announcement last night, he was suggesting a long, protracted war. He just gave an interview to Axios saying that he could wrap things up in 2 to 3 days and call it a victory. So we don't know exactly how long this war is going to last. I suspect it's going to be a shorter war rather than a longer war, because Donald Trump will pay a bigger political price back in the United States the longer this war drags on. And I think the motives are very much regime change if they could get it, but that's a tall order. I don't think that's actually an option because, this is a very resilient authoritarian regime. I think the goal fundamentally is state collapse. In other words, turn Iran into another Libya, a broken, weak state that can't project power beyond its borders, can't really control its own territory, and then, declare victory that the United States and Israel's primary adversary in the Middle East has been severely weakened. I think that's the objective.
You compared it to the Libya war, but considering this Iran, you're also an Iranian political analyst. According to you, we don't know if these reports are true or not of the Iranian leader Khamenei being killed, but if it is true, what kind of impact does it make on the Iranian regime as of now, and how do you look about its future as of in this context?
Yeah, it's symbolically, it's very important because this is the most powerful figure in the Iranian system. He's the one who makes the final decisions. But it's important to understand that the nature of authoritarianism in Iran is very different than it was under Muammar al-Gaddafi's Libya or Bashar al-Assad's Syria or Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Power is dispersed in the Iranian political system. It's not just the supreme leader who controls everything. There is the institutions of the Revolutionary Guard Corps. There are the economic classes. There are, these charitable foundations. So, removing one person doesn't collapse the system, as many people would hope would be the case. The other related point is that the Iranian regime has been planning for this moment for a very long time, and I suspect, in terms of Khamenei himself, this is the way he probably wanted to go out of this world, as a martyr killed by his foes so that the regime can hail him as a resistance fighter. And so they'll spin this as a propaganda story to sort of solidify support among its own supporters. But I don't think this fundamentally changes the balance of power within Iran. Far from it.
Right, and there are latest reports that say that there have been loud explosions heard in Tehran. How do you think are the Iranians looking at this war? We know that there are some reports of some pockets in Iran who are celebrating these attacks, but in a larger context, how do you think are Iranians looking at these attacks as of now?
Well, like all societies, Iranians are not a monolith. There are certainly many Iranians who are celebrating the death of their dictator. He's run Iran with a very brutal hand for over 30 years. More recently, in the context of the uprising that took place in late December, early January, he presided over a horrific massacre that killed and injured tens of thousands of people. So he was deeply despised among large segments of society, particularly young people. But then there's, those people who supported him. There is a domestic base of support in Iran. It's a small base of support, but he has a lot of loyalists. And then there's a lot of people who are on the fence, who don't fall into either camp and are really just worried about surviving day to day. What does this war mean? How will they be able to put food on their tables? They're interested in basic issues of law and order. And so that's a camp that is, also part of this equation.
And there was also reports of, we had remarks from Pahlavi, who also supported these attacks. What does it mean for Pahlavi, and how are Iranians looking at Pahlavi's role in this war?
Yeah, he's the son of the former dictator. He's very close to the Israeli government and pro-Israel and right-wing Republican, MAGA Republican forces in the United States. He has a very sophisticated social media and public relations operation. He's been celebrating these attacks. He knows the only way that he can get back into power in Iran is through a military assault of this nature. But of course, um, uh, getting back into power is easier said than done. It's not just a question of bombing Iran. Um, uh, he doesn't have a domestic base of support in Iran that's very vast. He doesn't have a network. He doesn't have an organization. He aspires to be Iranian, the future leader of Iran. But how he returns to Iran is completely unknown. And so he does have supporters, largely, in my view, because he has name recognition. He also has supporters because there are constituencies outside of Iran, people who are allied with the former regime, who support him. He also benefits from the fact that there's no other leader that has been able to insert itself and have the command of the public sphere the way that he has, as articulating a clear alternative to the Islamic Republic. Um, uh, so I think, he's celebrating this moment. He's hoping that the strikes will continue and that the regime will collapse. But my own reading of what's happening is that the regime is still very much intact. It will likely, at the end of this war, they'll be weakened. But I don't think this is the end of the Islamic Republic by any measure.
And talking of the regional countries, Dubai has now reported that there has been a fire at the city's famed luxury hotel. So, and this is not the only Gulf state that has been attacked. How are these Gulf states looking at this, and how do you assess these attacks of, retaliation from Iran on these Gulf states?
Well, they're very upset over what's happening. They're angry at Iran. I think they're angry that they couldn't prevail in trying to talk the United States back from the war because their whole economic development plan is predicated on stability. Dubai's claim to fame is this is a place where everyone can come, whether you're a Russian oligarch or just an average global citizen, and come and have a good time. It's safe, it's clean, it's stable. And Iran, by hitting Dubai, is sending a message that these Arab monarchies that are closely allied with Donald Trump politically and militarily and ideologically, they're going to pay a price if Iran is going to be hit in the way that it has been targeted in the last 12 days. So I think Iran is trying to, hit the United States where it's weakest, and that's in its alliances with these Arab countries that border Iran, hoping it would force a change in the calculation, specifically hoping that these Arab leaders pressure Trump and say, look, we cannot withstand the continuation of this war because our economies are suffering significant losses because of the violence that has been unleashed.